I have now finally seen the greatest film of all time. Guess who's nervous about making a video on it? Hi, my name's Stu and welcome to another review video on my channel. This particular one came about in a rather strange way. I'll be really honest, I am not a film buff, so I see myself as a very simple person, a layman when it comes to films. I enjoy them a lot, but it takes me some time and sometimes some difficulties to get through in order to actually understand and get a film. Same thing happened here. I watched the Netflix film Mank, which I will be treating in a separate review video that will come out shortly. But just so you know, I thought I want to watch it. It's got Gary Oldman on it. It's a David Fincher film. It's got Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross in the soundtrack. I thought, yes, I like all those things. I want to watch this film. Didn't know anything about it until I watched it and realised, okay, this is about Citizen Kane, which is a film I have not seen yet, or I had not seen yet at the time. Watched it anyway because I thought maybe it'll make sense, and it turns out that while yes, okay, it's a film with its own plot and everything, it is very, very different. And at the end, I did feel like, wait a second, there's something I'm not getting here. Am I just too stupid for the film? Quite possible. Like I say, I don't see myself as as the most knowledgeable about film and such things. So I thought, I need to watch Citizen Kane. So that's what happened. I rewatched Mank after seeing Citizen Kane. So I watched Mank, then watched Citizen Kane, and then rewatched Mank. So I saw Mank twice in 2 days, and I'm happy to report now I do get it, and it is a big enhancement. So if you are going to watch Mank, watch Citizen Kane first. But this video is focused entirely on Citizen Kane, because, as you may or may not know, Citizen Kane is hailed as the greatest film of all time. Now, I myself won't go to that level, as in I don't want to discuss whether it is the greatest film of all time. I feel I would have great difficulties of even making a top 10 list, because my thoughts and my preferences can vary at different times. And I feel there are just so many films that I do actually love. Although, as you may remember, Gladiator is definitely one of my favourite films of all time. If you're interested in my detailed thoughts on why I love that film, you can click on the link up here. But for now, we'll stick with Citizen Kane, and I fully agree that it is a magnificent film, particularly when you think about it coming out 80 years ago. Many things were done in this film that I fully understand were absolutely revolutionary at the time. I had a little look at various things about it. I did some research because I was fascinated by it. And to my understanding, while many of the techniques had been used in film before, this is pretty much the first film that tried to combine so many different and interesting, adventurous new techniques to change how we enjoy or make films. So there is no doubt about it that this is a truly magnificent film. Like I said, it's 80 years old, and considering all the films that I've seen, all the technical, magnificent special effects, etc., that I have enjoyed, even to me, again, as a layman, it was so obvious that this is a really revolutionary film. It felt very fresh in some ways. I'll talk about those a bit later. Those are my general thoughts. In case you haven't seen the film, if you're like me from just a week ago, to give you a brief overview without spoiling it, Citizen Kane is about the life of a man who is taken away from his family at an early age and given a lot of money, with which he decides, due to his principles, to buy a newspaper, and he wants to use those principles to try and advance society in a more progressive and social way, I'll call it. Problem with that is, over the years, it doesn't work out quite as well, and he changes a bit during this process. This isn't really a spoiler, it's the first seconds of the film. The film kicks off with literally the main character just dying, and the whole film turns into this quest to find out why he used the final word rosebud. a very famous thing. I've heard it before as well. It's been referenced all over the place, obviously. That is what the film is about. So you're following a journalist and he's trying to piece together the film of Charles Foster Kane. That is the main character, played by Orson Welles. That's pretty much all I'll tell you about the story. That's all you really need to know. It really is an interesting journey. I enjoyed it quite a lot. So one of the things that Citizen Kane does is flashbacks in a big amount, so there are very, very many flashbacks. The great thing is, due to the makeup work, which is fantastic, you are immediately aware of whereabouts you're supposed to be in Kane's life. So he is taken really from a young age. I mean, Orson Welles at the time was 24, I believe, or 25. And he's taken all the way through to old age, and the makeup really, like I say, makes it perfectly clear where in his life we're roughly at. So flashbacks are used in a very good way here. I would imagine that for the time it must have seemed a bit chaotic and unstructured to follow such a narrative. Nowadays, obviously, we're used to flashbacks a lot, but they are done inconsistently. I myself have talked about flashbacks in other reviews, and I feel this is a very good example because it's always a context. So whenever there are flashbacks in Citizen Kane, they are used to explain something vital, something interesting, something about the character or something that happened to him in his life. It's always for a purpose, and I really appreciate that. Probably what most people will find, or at least I did, the most phenomenal is the camera work, because there's so many shots in here where I myself wondered how did they do that, and it seems very original. One of the things that they do is deep focus, where you have something, a person or object, in the foreground, something in the background, and yet both of them are completely in focus, which is something that I found very interesting. I do wonder why it's not used more often in film. I quite enjoyed that, I must admit, because it does give you a different perspective. At times, I suppose if it's done badly, it will seem very, very silly. But here I really enjoyed it. You have, for instance, a scene where Kane is in the foreground, he's typing away. In the background, there's a man walking towards him and the two are talking with each other. I really enjoyed it because I felt that you can really feel the tension between the two because you're able to see both of them in focus completely. Or there's another scene where in his childhood, Kane is playing outside and then the camera draws back and it's through a window into the house and you're seeing what's happening inside the house and what's happening outside in complete focus at the same time. And it's something that I never knew I wanted until watching this film, but I really enjoyed just having that effect going on. It didn't feel gimmicky. I thought it was used really well just to make a wholesome picture. The acting is fine. I must admit I had not seen anything of Orson Welles before. This is my first experience with him, considering that he was only 24 at the time, and obviously this is not nowadays where you have so many child actors who progress through all sorts of education when it comes to acting. I would imagine that he did not have that much experience. I know he did radio plays, most famous of all probably War of the Worlds. So while obviously he did have some experience, it's still, I'd like to think that this is quite an achievement because he goes through all these different stages in his life, young, old, everything in between, and all sorts of emotions. He starts out with his principles and he's determined to fight for the small man, as I'll call him. Later on he becomes very, very power hungry and it sort of pushes people away from him and how he deals with that, anger issues, all sorts of these things, trying to control everything and everyone. So I feel Orson Welles does a great job. You have other characters in this film as well, friends that he's had and lost over the years, 2 wives, and all these people portray a great relationship with him. Although at times you do notice that particularly his second wife, there's a scene, I won't spoil it at all, but her acting did seem to be a bit over the top, and particularly the voice. I mean, that could be just the sound engineering at the time, and that kind of grated on me a bit. I wasn't a big fan of that, but overall still the acting very good. Again, I'd like to think 80 years ago, wow, it's all just really amazing to me. Coming back to the camera work, you've got all these shots where you're coming from the outside in. There's a famous one where we're on top of a roof, there's a neon sign, we're going through the roof, then you see a glass element of the roof, and we go through it and we suddenly peek into a whole room. Watching that, just to me, was fascinating, really, because I don't know how they did it. It was really excellent. So you've also got many good examples of editing, because it's obviously all being edited together really well, because as a viewer, you're not taken out of it. You don't realise that there's a switch between, I suppose, miniature and real set, etc. There's only one shot where I really noticed that, that we're dealing with miniatures here, and that's towards the end. You have a whole room which clearly inspired Indiana Jones, the big large storage room with all the boxes, etc. And you have a similar thing here, which again I assume Indiana Jones is one it was based off of, and that to me very clearly looked like a miniature. But again, you have a bit where it turns into a close-up, so it switches over into a close-up, and through the editing, etc., I at least, although I was paying attention because I thought, wait a second, there's something going on here, we're about to get a close-up, I couldn't tell where the switchover was. So that was done really, really well. So much love put into this film, absolutely, on all sorts of levels. You have creative scenes where, as my research showed, they actually cut a hole into the ground just so that they could put the camera up at a different angle, which was very new. Probably my favourite shot in the whole film is when Kane, he's on a podium, he wants to be elected as governor, and he's talking, there's a big poster behind him. You've probably seen this image. I must admit, it's a really great image. It's a poster of him behind him, and he's holding a speech, and the camera is coming slowly towards him while it is panning up, and it's a beautiful shot. To me, that was the best in the whole film. I really enjoyed it. Generally, the composition is always great. So Orson Welles obviously put a lot of thought in what he wants to have in this frame, in each frame. Like I say, that is to me a perfect example, because just Kane and the poster behind him, it goes together so well. I'm sure if you talk with a fan of the film, everyone will probably be able to give you different examples of what they think are great shots, but there's no doubt about it. So many memorable things in this film, completely understandable why it was so revolutionary. Another thing that's used a lot is lighting, and it is interesting to me, as I mentioned recently in my Lighthouse review, which you can click up here if you haven't seen it yet. I am not too familiar with black and white films. I haven't seen enough, so I can't really say that I'm an expert on them, not in any way. But when I think of black and white films, whenever you see clips on them on TV or elsewhere, they all seem very evenly lit, I'll call it. So everything, pretty much the whole room is usually well lit and all these things, because seemingly they had just a certain way of doing things. And this is where Orson Welles comes in, and the Mercury Productions, as I understand, the theatre is called, where they all work together. And they are a theatre troupe, basically, as I understand. And so they used all sorts of theatre methods. Orson Welles himself says he didn't know anything about making films. He just had these ideas in his dreams or whatever, and just tried to make them happen, turn them into reality. And this is where some of, or maybe all of the creative ideas come from. And I think that's a great thing, because I feel that, particularly film, you should not be restricted in any way. You shouldn't have limitations on how things should be done, etc. It's probably one of the best mediums out there to experiment and try out new things, and this is what they did in this film. Lighting is one of them. You have so many scenes where the lights are just very, very different. You might have just one cone of light coming down, which always makes something look very prestigious. There's a scene where a memoir is being read, and it's in this sort of vault, I'll call it. And there's just a beam of light coming down, and it just makes you feel how massive the whole room is, just by taking away all the things that you normally would see. You've got scenes where people's faces are actually covered in shadow, so very unusual. I mean, that, I must say, I'm not quite sure what the idea was there, because I thought it actually took away a bit from it by not being able to see people's faces. But generally, I like that there was experimentation going on. Overall, I am really pleased that Mank made me watch Citizen Kane finally. I've obviously had it on my list for years, never got around to doing it. Totally worth it. Absolutely worth it. And so in summary, it deserves its title as one of the best films of all time. I personally won't call it the greatest film of all time, just because I don't know enough about film, and I don't know enough films to actually make that statement. But it's certainly a magnificent film. I am definitely going to rewatch it at some point. Highly recommend that you see it if you haven't. particularly if you want to watch Mank, and this is where I will now insert a link up here as soon as the other video comes out, which should be just a few days after this one. So if you're watching this as it's released, I'm sorry, nothing will appear up here, but this is for the future and later viewers. Let me know what you thought of Citizen Kane in the comments down below, your favourite scenes, your favourite things about this film. Stuff you think disqualifies it as the greatest film of all time. Boy, am I looking forward to these comments. I'll thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, I would appreciate if you liked and shared the video around. Subscribe to the channel for more videos, particularly Mank coming out in a few days, and I will see you in either that one or the one after. Take care. Bye.